Hello and welcome to our series of conversations with men and women whose ideas, vision and philosophy define our contemporary. My guest today is a teenage, reincarnate spiritual leader of one of the four major schools of Tibetan Buddhism, the Kagyu Lineage. He shot into global headlines a little over 4 years ago when he traveled across the Indo-China border to collect ostensibly his hat and some musical instruments, in a journey that was reminiscent and echoed the escape into exile in India by His Holiness the Dalai Lama in 1959. I'm delighted to welcome Karmapa Lama. Welcome. How has your time in India lived up to your expectations?
Madrubi China, Mabuchi, Tanasi, Drubi China, Mabuchi, Drubi Chadi, so and the church, the Loja, the Charlie, never started, the Ine, Karsura, Yan Chokashi, Desirun Dilian, Arasova, Chokashi, Tada, India, Madruba, the Chadi was.
Since coming to India, some of my hopes and aspirations have been fulfilled, I must say, especially in the realm of my wish to further my studies, and in the presence of eminent Rinpoches, receiving of transmissions, empowerment teachings. In that line, yes, a good deal of wishes are being fulfilled. And there are others that are left unfulfilled, such as my and fellow disciples' wish for me to take my seat of my predecessor in Rumtek Monastery.
The travel and passage into India was very dramatic. Would the Karmapa Lama tell us briefly about this journey into India?
My journey
was very clear. Now that my actually visit to India, escape to India has become more like a story. But the purpose of it was very, very clear, in that I had complete confidence in the goodness of the teachings of the Buddha, and for which I exist, and for which every sacrifice is worth. And so therefore, in that, with that wish, I made up the mind to take the journey. And because that is what I needed, and so worth going for it. But the manner in which I had to undertake it is to escape and go and seek asylum. And so from that point of view, yes, it was a very frightening experience of what might be awaiting. And so just instead of having to go into any details, this is briefly the two most significant feelings.
Under what circumstances might you consider returning to Tibet?
I
think I have addressed this issue a couple of times in the past. That is, given that there is the ideal circumstances in Tibet where that there is a true freedom to pursue the cultural expression of Tibet, and the essence of the culture of Tibet is Buddhism, Buddhist spirituality. When there is true, unhindered freedom to pursue the spiritual culture in its entirety, in terms of practice and expression of it, and as well as when it is appropriate time for His Holiness the Dalai Lama also to have the opportunity to return, then at such time I would look at is look at it as a very joyful and appropriate circumstance to return.
What might you consider an acceptable political arrangement in the Tibet that you return to?
From a political perspective or point of view, what it could be, I myself don't know. Nevertheless, what is obvious on a human level is that a number of Tibetans who are in exile outside of Tibet, I feel they have the earnest wish to want to return to Tibet. But there is a fear, and that fear is that there is no freedom of expression and freedom of embracing of the cultural heritage. And I do share that spirit, and of course, and that is true, I think, among all Tibetans.
Do you feel that with the population transfer happening in Tibet, with westernization happening, with the building of the railroad, that Tibetan culture is really going to survive long enough for you to go back to?
Obviously, there is a deep concern in this area because there is appearance of development and progress in Tibet, and not only in Tibet, all over the world, that people have the tendency of being carried away by this appearance of development and progress, or in fact deceived by this appearance of development at the sacrifice and the cost of very rich and profound ancestral heritage, ancient culture, culture in general, and in the case of in Tibet, the culture of Buddhist spirituality. So yes, in that way there is a great concern. Nevertheless, in the world at the same time these days, there is also a growing interest in Tibetan culture, particularly that Buddhist culture as preserved in Tibet. Not only there is a growing awareness in general that even among more sophisticated and educated people, such as philosophers and scientists, there seems to be a growing interest, and in fact, that Buddhism and the Buddhist philosophy has become an object of praise as well as research. And given that importance, or recognition of that importance, I hope that the Tibetan Buddhist culture will survive through all phases.
You're watching a conversation with the 17th Karmapa. We'll be right back after a short break. Welcome back. Karmapa Lama, you have been embroiled in some senses in the middle of a great deal of political issues, political controversy about your role in Sikkim. How do you reconcile your own spiritual aspiration as a Lama, as a reincarnate Lama, with those of the political role that you have found yourself in?
I do not only consider myself as a spiritual person. I am a spiritual person, and I want to pursue spiritual practice in a very pure way. And that is one of the principal reasons for my escape. To be able to not only pursue spirituality in a pure way, but also to be able to maintain the purity of our spiritual lineage. And so that has been my purpose and continues to be my purpose. Yes, since coming to India, due to a number of personally unavoidable circumstances, I find myself embroiled in all kinds of political issues that I feel I am being used for all kind of political instruments of sorts. That is not of my choice. And from a spiritual point of view, as a spiritual practitioner, I view, and we generally view, these as obstacles to spiritual practice, and probably some karma, personally or collective karma, might be the case. But one thing is, when one encounters these unfavorable circumstances and manipulations of different kinds, it has a, in a way, healthy effect. There is a very challenging effect. It challenges one's commitment, and therefore my role and my wish as a pure spiritual practitioner continues to be unwavering, and that is becoming more ascertained.
How does you think that the situation in Sikkim might resolve itself?
There is a good number of reasons I should go to Sikkim, and everyone is aware of the fact that Sikkim, the Rumtek Monastery, is the seat of my predecessor, established by my predecessor, and therefore that's a very important reason from a spiritual point of view that I take the seat of my predecessor. And more importantly, it is the wish of the people of Sikkim and followers in general. It is their wish that their spiritual leader is able to take the right seat, and people are not only have this wish, but aware of the fact that people in Sikkim and the connection between the Karmapa goes for generations, and so therefore there's this very deep spiritual bond. But because of certain political circumstances, created political circumstances, at the moment, as you know, I'm not able to go to Sikkim. I have not lost my confidence. I feel that in due time I will be in Sikkim, purely because I have confidence in the nobleness of the Indian government, that the Indian government embodies wisdom and nobleness, and that this nobility and wisdom of the Indian government in due time will manifest on my behalf because of the truth I stand for.
You have said recently in a press report that the Tibet's problem is India's problem. What did you mean by that?
Yes, the most important wealth of Tibet is the Tibetan culture, and essence which is Buddhist spirituality. And that is the very heart and essence of the Tibetan culture, and which we as Tibetans are our cause of pride. Where did this rich, profound Buddhist culture come from to Tibet? India. And that this rich Buddhist culture, having come from India, as you know, Tibetans regard India and Indians very highly. That this incredible wealth of Buddhist culture has come from the Arya Bhumi of India to Tibet. And there is a deep recognition of that. Given the circumstances in Tibet, there has been a great damage in connection with the Buddhist culture, Tibetan culture in Tibet, and there is a danger of the extinction of the Tibetan Buddhist culture in Tibet. And the extinction of Tibetan Buddhist culture in Tibet is, in my feeling, extinction of the Buddhist culture in India too. Because this was an Indian ancestral heritage. This is an important Indian ancient heritage. What belongs to us belongs to India, belonged to India, if you want. And so my thinking was, yes, it is not only a loss for Tibet and Tibetans, but it is a loss to the source. Problem in the sense, it is a loss to the source, to India. And then, as you are aware, our relationship is like parent and children. You know, India is our parent. We are India's children. And so, in that spiritual context, India should raise its children properly, protect its children. And if I may say so, if India does not bring up and raise and protect its children properly, in the eyes of the world, it might be an embarrassment for India, and more than that, a big loss too, because that this wealth came from India, and if the Tibetans are not able to preserve it, and if India fails to support to preserve it, then probably the loss is more certain.
You're watching In Conversation with the 17th Karmapa. We'll be right back after a short break. As a 17th Karmapa, you are at the apex of a long lineage. Do you have recollections of any of your past incarnations, and what are these memories?
To have recollection of previous incarnation is something not easy. But once in a while, when I watch the documentary film on my predecessor, for instance, I have an interesting feeling of recollection that somehow with some of these images I have a feeling of familiarity. But beyond that, I personally do not have recollections, and it is not easy for anyone to have recollections of previous lives that easily.
His Holiness the Dalai Lama has increasingly gone in for the democratization of his political role. After the lifetime of His Holiness, and he's in his late 60s, do you see any role for yourself, that of political leadership perhaps?
I
am a practitioner of the Buddhist teaching, and I have a responsibility to serve the Buddhist teaching, the cause of the Buddhist teaching. I have a responsibility to serve the cause of beings, and that is my role, my responsibility. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama has also kindly, on a number of occasions, given me advice as to I have to take my spiritual responsibility of serving others seriously, and to learn to develop the necessary qualities. And I am training myself in the Buddhist teaching to be able to take my responsibility of serving beings through the Buddhist teachings as best as I can. And that responsibility is always there. In a way, that responsibility is very natural to me. But beyond that, I do not see myself at all taking another responsibility of a different nature.
Buddhism is now a global tradition and a global faith, and there are people who are interested in it from all over the world. But the tradition of the Bodhisattva in some ways is uniquely Mahayana, uniquely Tibetan. What role do you see for yourself as a teacher of Buddhism beyond Tibetans?
미스의 많이 베이네야다 샘제 탐제 야와 된데 여바다 동에 제대 여바다 지부 차리가 그래 인도산 아니
regardless of whether you are Tibetan or not, whether you are Buddhist or not, what is common among all people and all beings is same, and that is all beings without exception want happiness and want freedom from suffering. So in that way, that there is no exception between the wishes, difference rather between the wishes of beings, regardless of what different religious belief or formal religious traditions they prescribe to. And so with the understanding that all humanity equally wish for happiness, wish for freedom from suffering, and there is a need for people to be guided on the proper path, the proper way to serve, to the proper way to benefit beings. So I am therefore training myself to be able to serve beings and regardless of what they believe and faith. And obviously the people have to appreciate the importance of the role of spirituality in their life. But as far as my wish for others is concerned, my wish for others is others' well-being is impartial. And I hope I can benefit all impartially too.
Karmapa Lama, this has been a great blessing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.